freight is not an easy game. Folks such as you, Ram, we're not in it for the quick buck anymore. We've realized that we're lifers in this game. And that the fact that we can go create a new company with new perspective, it means that we're thinking differently. We want to bring value. And that is what a lot of our customers needs to really understand. Today, we are having a catch up with my longtime friend and ex-colleague, Ram from Silq. Some of you who's been following our channel for some time will know that he was actually one of the very few VIP guests we had when we first started the channel. He was kind enough to give us some airspace when he secured first round funding. I believe it was $18 million, Ram, for his business Silq. So we're going to have a catch up. A lot has happened since our last chat. So I'm very delighted you are back, Ram, and I can't wait to talk to you with what's happening in the world of Silq and Ram.
Thank you, La. It's always a pleasure to just catch up with you and talk about life and freight and the business we all have chosen to build a life around. So I'm excited for this. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, I recall when we first chatted. I think was it almost a year ago?
Probably a little more at this point, I would say.
Okay,
something along those lines. Yeah.
And that was when we just first started the channel, and I was just wanting to bring some real good quality content, just to understand who is what and what are they doing differently to the status quo. And you were such an obvious choice because with Silq, the model of the Silq that you built on, it is very unique, and the perspective on how you're approaching logistics and supply chain is different, right? Because there isn't another voice that sort of was championing that that quality assurance check on the ground in origin, and then giving your customers that price point where it's per unit count, as opposed to worry about all of the different silos of fees and what have you. Something better than I do that I'm very passionate about as well, but you just push the one step further. So how is it all going with that particular business model?
Absolutely. Before I go there, you started off with saying you wanted quality content and you reached out to me first. I want to remember to send this thing to my wife. It's very important. Quality content from Ram, one for the stars. Anyway, obviously the world has evolved significantly since, but what we started out with continues to be true today. I think during the pandemic, it was the realization that most customers wanted to invest in a lot more visibility. Visibility was a buzzword, and you threw visibility and AI, and there you got $1 billion company. So we essentially came to the realization that visibility starts at the factory floor, and you can throw all kinds of GPSs and gizmos on a container or on a boat or on a truck. There's been a lot of legislation that actually promotes all of these. But yet, despite all of these changes, the first mile, which is basically when your shipment is going to get ready, what does that shipment look like, where is it going to be ready at, and where is it going to, is a part of the puzzle that continues to be very, very manual. This is a problem for pretty much every forwarder under one metric. We call the metric cost to serve. That's your operating cost. The way I explain it to people who are not new to shipping is, and this is an unpopular opinion, in some ways, container shipping is a commoditized business. Containers are a commodity. As freight forwarders, we don't control the price of the container. The market determines the price of the container. As a freight forwarder, what we do is that handoff, that service of moving the container from the factory to the port, to the carrier, to the destination, right? Managing those handoffs effectively. And in that scenario, the cost of the container is irrelevant. The cost to serve is what really matters. That's what we get paid to do. That's what we spend our money on managing. And if you want to manage that effectively, that starts at the factory floor. If you can plan that effectively and knowing when shipments get ready, moving the container just becomes that much more easier. That was the thesis, that is the thesis, and that will continue to be the thesis of Silq. And frankly, our customers are having a gala time. I mean, I want to kind of tout the fact that most customers, pretty much every customer who works with us today and most customers we talk to, almost always start with, oh yeah, I'm really interested in inspections. Here, start managing my shipments and tell me how you can get me more visibility at the factory floor. That continues to be a problem that is not solved yet. It's not going to get solved by waving the magic wand. It's hard work. It's dirty, grunt, hard work on the factory floor. You're going to get your hands greasy, and that's the only way to do it. And that's what we do every day.
Ram, you've been a traditional freight forwarder, right? Back in your
That's
CH
right.
Robinson days. So you've been a traditional freight forwarder. So you would have had interactions and conversations with your customers then. How do you find your conversations with your customers at Silq today? How are those conversations different in terms
Yeah.
of rapport building, in terms of, let's call it reach, collaboration, all that good stuff? How is that different?
Absolutely. I'm going to paraphrase a quote from one of my friends, Ben Braverman, who was a CRO of Flexport back then. Back in the early days, we used to make these sales pitches, and we used to go to these companies, big companies, big potential customers, and we pitch them on, hey, technology can change your life. And people would be like, nah, I don't want it. And he wouldn't blink an eye, and he would basically say, listen, you don't want to adapt to technology. That's fine. 5 years from now, you wouldn't be here. There'd be a different company in this office, and I'll come and sell to them. Right? You got to kind of keep on with things and catch up and keep moving forward, right? So in general, comparing to my relationship or my interactions with customers 5 years ago at CH Robinson, and now, not 5 years ago, 10 years ago at CH Robinson to now, I would say the customers are open to embracing change. We're open to accepting that they have a problem is probably the first thing, right? For the most part, customers are, for a long time, have been attuned to saying, hey, this is how it's been done, and we're going to continue doing it this way. Those customers continue to, find every folder every 6 months, maybe, or whatever it is. Customers are saying, hey, I do have a problem. I want to be able to plan my shipments more efficiently. I want to have fewer deliveries coming into my warehouse. I want to maximize utilization of my container. I want to have lesser returns. These are things that, frankly, maybe 5-10 years ago, people weren't talking about as much. Or maybe they were, it's just the enterprise companies were talking about it. If you were a small or medium-sized business, getting your inventory was a big enough problem. Consolidating probably was not. And you weren't thinking about ways because a lot of the data was not accessible to you at that point. So what's changed today is that with technology, with a lot of the changes that has happened in the market, there's a lot more information available to you. Obviously, there's a lot more noise as well. You got to be picky about what you really see as data that makes and influences your business. But a lot more data is available right now, and that's what's changed right now. Customers are asking us questions that 10 years ago they did not even know were problems that existed. And that's kind of, so, be it efficiency on maximizing utilization in a container, be it, carbon efficiency, be it, reducing the number of touch points on how many people interact with my shipments. All of these were not as much of an issue if you're a small or medium-sized business. You were just desperately trying to get your cargo into the country. That's changed now. You have options, you have suggestions, you have solutions, you have opinions, and we cater to all of those today. That's what changed, I would say.
Right. So would you say then the customer today who utilizes our services, would you describe them as more digitized, more sophisticated, or is it just something basically that's the law of the land? It's a generational shift, paradigm shift in how they are using traditional freight services?
I would definitely agree with the word that they are very much more sophisticated. I would not necessarily say they're very digitized. There's very sophisticated, and I'll give you a classic example. The average person we're selling shipping to today is also the average user of Amazon every day. That's where they buy their, toiletries. And if I can buy a toothbrush on Amazon and I can track it all the way from the warehouse to my door, I don't understand why I can't find a 40-foot metal box and where it is on the face of the earth. It puzzles you, right? So they're way more sophisticated, and they're expecting a similar experience in other parts of their interactions in their daily life. I wouldn't necessarily say the world has been fully digitized yet in supply chains. And it's also a word that's been thrown around a little bit more freely, especially with the pandemic. I don't think anybody has a very defined definition of what digitization means in supply chain. People can talk about digitizing documents. People can talk about digitized on a platform and seeing where the container moves on a ship. For me personally, digitization, or at least for Silq, I can speak confidently, digitization is all about structuring the data. As I told you earlier, majority of the operations shipping happens on WeChat, WhatsApp, email, phone calls. That's pretty much where the meter on the bones are. That's where the decisions get made. And as long as they live offline, you're never going to learn from those decisions. It's just going to be all over the place. You're going to spend more time uncovering when things go wrong, where an interaction that went wrong. So it's not necessarily digitized as yet, in my opinion, unless you digitize that piece of, how that decision evolved as to you deciding to move a shipment a particular way. Everything else that comes after, in forgive the phrase, but it's putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
You really want to kind of, track the genesis of the decision, not just, track the decision itself.
Well, our industries are very, very good at putting lipsticks on pigs.
Tell me about it.
So circling back to Silq then, like, because your, let's call your product is unique to pretty much most of the product that's on offer in our industry. How have you found your delivery of the pitch process to an organization? And I would imagine that you will need to speak to the higher echelons of an organization as opposed to more desk level, because how you are really sort of structuring your product is, a desk level shipping coordinator isn't going to be vested or, at their pay grade to be concerned about. Right. How do you bridge the gap? Because, you have, say, for example, a shipping coordinator, you start a conversation there and they'd be focusing on a container rate. Like you said, it's a commodity. And then you bring in this product. So, then you naturally have to sort of branch your way up to the upper echelons of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Listen, the pitch is pretty straightforward for us. It's a 3-word, 1-line pitch: shipping without surprises. It's delivering that promise of making shipping without the surprises is what we try to do. And no, we actually started, we found what we call them champions internally. We find our internal champion. It could be a logistics coordinator, it could be an analyst, it could be somebody who schedules deliveries to their warehouse. We start working with them. Frankly, as you go up the totem pole, what my realization or what we've realized over the years is there's 2 things that matter. By the time it goes, all the way to the top, a lot of the noise falls apart. And what really goes to the top is data. It's like numbers. You're talking about on-time performance or cost. And the other thing is relationships. And I'm not going to be able to build a relationship with, a CEO unless somebody in the company is willing to champion me and take me all the way up to the CEO. So I need to deliver value to the guy. I need to show how I can make a logistics analyst's life better. And only then can I earn him to be a champion for me and take me to the boss. And by the time I take him to the boss, I need to make sure my ducks are in a row. I can actually deliver the cost savings I'm promising. I can actually give that predictability that I'm promising to deliver shipping without the surprises with data and not just the pitch. The pitch rarely makes it to the top. The numbers need to make it to the top first before I even get a shot to climb that elevator. And only after that do I get there to even go and foster a relationship. It doesn't stop there. So those days of, probably, I'm sure you've lived in freight forwarding long enough. We still stand by the word freight forwarding is a relationship-based business. But relationships starting at the top is not a common thing. The days are gone where you could all go golfing and hang out with a bunch of buddies and say, dude, move it with me. And, I'm going to be your son's godfather. And now you're going to ship with me for the rest of your life. Those used to be the days. I know people who are godfathers of their, customers' kids and things like that, right? Those days used to exist. It's just not common anymore. It still probably happens few and far in between. It takes time to build relationships. That's just the honest truth of it. There's not enough blog posts I can write or media appearances I can make to form a relationship. Data is one sure shot way to build a relationship. My earnest effort is to earn that opportunity to present that data. And that's all. I'm working still. Our pitches tends to be more on logistics analysts, logistics managers, senior logistics managers, maybe directors of logistics and supply chain. That's pretty much the realm of who we try to talk to, because frankly, those are the people's lives we're impacting on a day-to-day basis. And we expect them to take us and champion us to their leadership teams.
Well, you make it sound relatively easy, and the process, I know is a very challenging process because, like you said, there is a lot of noise, a lot of clutter in our industry, and the users of our service, let's put them that way, really don't have any bona fide standard of engagement that they follow. So
Yeah.
most of them don't actually even know how to start the conversation when they need the service of a freight forwarder, right?
Yeah.
So then, you've got essentially two parties doing these ones, right? And this is just like, it's like stabbing in the dark, finding a needle in a haystack, and this is why most folks outside of our industry don't understand the challenge of our industry. It is actually just starting the conversation, with the right frame of mind. And then we're talking about bringing all these new perspectives and new ideas and new values into it. The game, it is, you really got to love the game to sell the game,
No, I will be honest though, right? I agree with you. I've run to a number of sales calls. So there's an amazing D2C brand that actually is a very profitable, well-run D2C brand that we were pitching a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't really go very far, and I was really bummed about it, right? And frankly, the conversation was very much the way you just said. The customer was shooting at us in different directions. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this analytics? Can you show me carbon emissions in one screen? Can you show me how I can offset the carbon if I routed this through this canal? It was just like it was coming at us like bullets. For a second, I was like very disheartened that we're not going to get through, because obviously, the kind of things the person was asking us for was in some ways outside the realm of possibility. And I, again, it was a 30-minute call. There was 55 bullets that came my way. And one or two of those were carbon. There's a whole bunch of other things that were related to it. And as much as I felt terrible about it, at the end of the day, I had I had to channel my inner empathy. I'm a father now. I have a 4-year-old, and to be like, what makes them think this way is frankly, man, we got to take some ownership as freight forwarders. There's been enough people before me who've gotten in front of this person and have pitched so many different things that has made them think this way. You gotta own it. It isn't uncommon even today for a freight forwarder to give a quote, and then the invoice looks very different from the quote. It happens every
day. Every day. To everyone.
Right. So, who are we to stand here and blame that this customer's asked me 55 bullets? Of course they're going to do it, because they've been screwed over and over again. And these are not just, fly-by-night operators. Large forwarders do it. Established global forwarders do it. It's just, there's no other way around it. These guys have been doing it for eons. How often do you run into a customer who says, my forwarder guarantees air freight in 3 days? I'm like, dude, buddy, you're buying deferred air freight. Have you read the fine print? Is there any recourse you have? The shipment arrives in 14 days. You don't. Yeah. That's just the fact of it. But, there have been so many bad apples ahead of me. So,
well, there are still many bad apples around us, Ram. There's still many. And I think, you and I, we share the same bandwidth when it comes to our industry. And believe me, our voice is one of very few. Because let's face it, a bulk majority of our industry that are thriving probably thrives off that inconsistency, thrives off the complex maze that they've laid out in terms of almost like a trap, So it's like a lot of our market that we serve, our customers, are so brainwashed by it all. It's becoming such a laborious task when they need to change. And I think that's by design. It's not by accident. That as soon as they go for one, they'll ask you 50,000 questions. And they're just ticking boxes, right? As soon as it's ticked, guess what? They're never going to ask the same question again. And that's the pity. So whatever you're saying, I feel you, brother, because the pain is real. The pain is real.
Yeah, I just, at the end of the day, you got to channel the empathy, and I can't, I said this in my first interview at C.H. Robinson, just about coming up, 12 years since I took my first job in forwarding. They asked me, what is your thought about a customer, or what is your philosophy? I forget the exact phrase, the question, what's your customer service philosophy? And I said, customer is king. They get what they want. In some ways it is, in a lot of ways to this day, I agree, the customer is a king at the end of the day, and they get what they want, right? But it's unfortunate that you have to live with the fact that they've been seasoned with so many different, contradictory sales pitches that, there is a sense of distrust when you're getting involved. And I have to work my way up the chain. That's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do about it. I can't fault them for it. This is by design, like you said. The system is opaque. It is expected to, so that, the customer oversees something and you get to make a buck. That's just the way the system is designed, and we're going to have to work around it. There's nothing we can do about it.
If I can maybe just give you and people like you a plug to our viewers who may be potential customers, realize that freight is not an easy game for the pure reason that there is so much noise that there are out there. And the very few of us that are suckers for punishment not only have departed the industry when we should have, if we were clever, but we're not.
Oh man, if I had a penny for every time.
That we've bet essentially our existential future, or our future livelihood on not only continue to be in it, but go all in. Our skin is in the game, and we're still trying to bring new ideas after being flogged over the head again and again as salesperson, account managers, and what have you. So folks such as you, Ram, we're not in it for the quick buck anymore. We've realized that we're in it we're lifers in this game. And that the fact that we can go create a new company with new perspective, it means that we're thinking differently. We want to bring value. And that is what a lot of our customers needs to really understand. Look at who is selling to you. Is this just a sales guy with a multinational who's got a monthly budget he's got to meet, and you're the flavor of the month or not? And are they saying the same pitch to you and everyone else? Or is this guy who's done his time in the trenches, freaking paid his dues, created now, putting everything he's got into a game now that he's going to be in it for the lifetime of this person? Now, who would you buy from? I know who I buy from.
Absolutely.
So there's a plug for folks such as you, Ram, fighting the good fight.
I know, right? Listen, you've been doing this long enough, and I've been watching you. You started the company way before I did, and I was like, man, I got onto it. It's about time I picked up the ballot, picked up and ran as well. So kudos to you, man. I mean, like you said, it's not easy. And, the fact that you built TGL to be what it is today, I don't think it came doing it the easy way. So kudos to your team.
Thank you very much. So moving on, just to cover for our audience, the market conditions. As you know, the market conditions have taken somewhat of a bombastic plunge. A bombastic plunge from the COVID years. What are you seeing? What are you seeing from your end? And how has the game changed with respect to how the market have completely just crashed?
I mean, there's a boom and bust cycles. We never learn from our mistakes is probably what we have to say, right? This has happened, I don't know how many times at this point. But hey, this is just the economic, the cyclicality of the business. The way I explain it to people, again, in the US who work on the Trans-Pacific trade, which is China to the US, just for illustrative purposes, none of these are accurate numbers. Disclaimer there. 2019, a container on the Trans-Pacific was probably about $2,000, something in that neighborhood. 2022, the container was $22,000. And now it's back to, sub $2,000. I mean, almost $1,000, I would say. Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. It's unfortunate at this point, the way it is. At this point, the way the market is operating right now, no one is making money. The carrier who's carrying the box is not making money. The forwarder who's moving that box is not making money. And it's not sustainable, right? It was not sustainable at 22,000. It was not sustainable at $1,000. This has to change. This will change over a period of time. The market has to correct itself. What are we seeing? There was a brief bit of chaos. I don't know if you guys caught the wind of that on your end of the world, but there was a bit of chaos, say, probably pretty much April on to probably just about now, right? Mid-May. There was a little bit of chaos because for those, again, who are not from the industry, we have what's called a contract season. Contract season runs March to May. That's when the ocean carriers get to go negotiate annual contracts with all the big customers out there. And it's in their best interest to have leverage to have a slightly higher rate when you're going to the negotiating table. If your spot market rates are in the toilets, you're not going to really get leverage. So obviously there was a lot of, we're going to increase the rate, the GRI is going to go up, and there's this congestion and that congestion, and there's the Panama Canal that's having a drought situation right now. All of this stuff was kind of adding to the pressure of increasing the rates. But unfortunately, the market has kind of gone back to where it is. The market is stubborn, just like how inflation is stubborn. The market is stubborn on saying, hey, we're not ready yet for an increase. There is still a gluttony of inventory, especially in the consumer businesses in the US. There was a lot of, I don't think this is news for anybody at this point. There was a lot of optimism in 21 and probably carried over into the first half of 22. That resulted in a lot of exorbitant buying decisions when money was cheap and money was free, and now all of those chickens are coming home to roost. So there is, I would say, a general slowdown in the amount of volume customers are importing. There was a little bit of anticipation that things would pick up as we get ready for the holidays. Frankly, there is still a fair bit of optimism as we get closer towards the shipping season. So June, July is when things start picking up. The US economy revolves around the holidays, and that's when things start picking up. There is still a decent bit of optimism, but it's not going to be as crazy as the last couple of years. In general, we're expecting things to, frankly, die down, be a little bit more calmer. There are going to be some businesses, unfortunately, are going to have to go out of business. It's just the laws of the jungle. That's just the way the world works. We're seeing the same on the US side. We saw a lot of traction also in transition within Asia. There was a lot of, hey, we're going to, get out of China movement that was happening, and I'm going to go to Vietnam, diversify my supply chain, go to India, go to Indonesia. And even that action is starting to die down a little bit, mostly influenced by, customers don't have the resources to be like, hey, I don't have a large enough spend time vetting 50 suppliers and getting samples, and, I'm just going to lay low and, be a cockroach, let this nuclear holocaust blow over. Yeah. So in fact, a lot of customers who left and said, I'm going to go experiment in other markets have come back and said, you know what, we prefer the stability that China offers. And this is what I tell people, like, there are a lot of things you could change, but you can't change geography. It's still 18 days, 16 to 18 days from Shanghai to LA.
That's right.
You can go anywhere you want. There's nothing you can do about it. 16 to 18 days. The lead time, if you're used to it, it's like a drug. You can't get out of it. So a lot of that action is also kind of, changed, and there's not a lot of adventure happening in the market, so to speak.
Yeah.
So in general, there's a lot more like, okay, come back to the basics. I think somebody on LinkedIn says this, like, top line is for vanity, bottom line is for sanity. Now it's all focused on sanity, not as much about vanity anymore.
That's a good one. I'm going to use that one.
There's a lot more emphasis on sanity these days.
Yeah. Well, our government here in Australia have also, with all the geopolitical tensions and, and all of a sudden China is public enemy number one now and so forth. And the party line, the party line here in Australia is that, to diversify away from China. And I have great issues with that statement because it comes from a politician standing on a podium, and they don't understand the hardship of their citizens, of their small and medium-sized businesses that would have spent their hard-earned money creating those relationships in China. Not 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, but decades of relationships, product development, and creating a viable supply chain that is their livelihood. You don't pivot away from something like that just click of a finger and other things that we must take into consideration, which you touched on earlier, is this the shipping infrastructure. The dark clouds are very much still up on us, and we haven't really gotten the brunt of it yet. So I think you're very right. The smart ones of us out there, in terms of the ones that trading the goods, will be sticking to what they know. They're not going to take the big risky jumps.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, it's a pretty it's pretty stark out there for a lot of companies who kind of traded on the free money, and now you gotta like I said, right, you gotta wait for the nuclear holocaust to kind of blow through, and there is going to be death and there's going to be bloodshed, and it's just a fact, just a way of life, and you're going to have to stay put, know what you know, and do what you do very well, and just focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about something which I know that is going to, it's a very interesting, I'm very high on this subject. And I have a lot of opinions on this. And
yes, sir.
My personal comment about opinion is that I'm not one that reads opinion pieces, nor do I like to give opinions. but I do like to give opinions on this particular subject. And this is the subject of digital freight forwarding. And then maybe in brackets AI, the insurgence of AI into everything that we know. I think it is fair to say you play in the world of digital freight forwarding, if I may, put you in that little bracket.
Of course.
So what are your thoughts with all these buzzwords that's coming out, digital freight forwarding or digital whatever?
Hey, listen, it's something you gotta issue a brand. You gotta have a brand for everything you do. And digital freight forwarding was a buzzword that probably picked up a lot of steam about 10 years ago, I would say. Let me put it this way, right? I have nothing against that term because frankly, I've been a beneficiary of that term itself. For people who are listening, I was part of the early founding team at Flexport, one of the flag bearers of innovation when it comes to digital freight forwarding, a company that I greatly admire and I love and I've been a part of. I was there for 5 years, saw the company evolve over, from 10 odd people to almost 2,000-3,000 people. And now the company is going through a much larger revolution right now with all these changes, right? Now, I think all of that was in good spirits. It's all built in the right direction, saying, hey, there needs to be more data that drives these decisions. It cannot be driven by the fact that the guy who I play golf with is the guy who moves all my cargo. It's not just about the dollars you spend on shipping. It's also about the risk you're putting your business in, the kind of money you're leaving on the table without knowing what are the other options available out there. There's a lot more that becomes possible when you have data around you. Just like how we live our lives these days. Just in general, the apps we use and all of that, it just made our lives better. We have to believe that. If you don't believe that, then, probably this is not the podcast now, is when you switch to another YouTube video. You have to believe that, the tools you use is actually making your life better. And that was the whole intent of digital freight forwarding. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of that, the term itself, but how that is interpreted and how different companies pursue digital forwarding and how they project the values of digital forwarding. There has been a lot of watered down philosophies that have been pushed that don't really add up. When you look at the numbers, they don't really add up at the end of the day. The whole intent of digital forwarding, in my opinion, to my point earlier, as a freight forwarder, our job is to manage the transaction. We don't control the cost of the container or the cost of the fuel that moves the container on the ship. None of that we control. We only control the transaction moving it from one person to the next. As a digital freight forwarder, my cost of managing the transaction has to be lower. And the example I would use is probably take, for example, Charles Schwab, is one of the world's biggest digital, stock brokerages. Eons ago, they basically manage the transaction of you buying stock on paper and they charged you a fee. Today, they do it digitally. They don't charge you a fee. They just allow you to manage the transaction. That's pretty much what a digital forwarder is supposed to be. You're there to manage the transaction of moving a shipment from point A to point B. And how efficient can you be is all that comes down to. And legacy forwarding involves a lot of paper. I was having lunch with somebody and I was telling them about my first job at Robinson back then was literally moving folders across racks. There were 4 racks. There were 2 racks on this side, booked, ready to ship, arrive at destination and deliver to customer. And my job as an intern was to move that folder across the 4 racks, just track it every day. And now, that is all moved into the system. The whole intent is there was a cost of paying me $15 an hour to do that. Well, now you don't need $15 an hour RAM to do that. The technology can do it. That is the value of digital forwarding. If you can kind of make that more efficient, that's what it's supposed to be. Everything else is all farce. It's putting lipstick on a pig. At the end of the day, that's how I look at my business. What really matters is how can we deliver the maximum value to the customer at the lowest possible operating cost? As simple as that, right? And everything else goes into it. Your relationship with the customer, all of that goes into the value. If the customer doesn't see me calling him at 4 o'clock to go get a drink as value, then I shouldn't call him. That's it. It's as simple as that.
Well, let's not. I do say, Ram, never trust a freight forwarder who doesn't drink, because that freight forwarder isn't working hard enough.
Oh yeah. Come on. It's a funny joke. I probably is worth it. Like I had a friend of mine who was traveling around the world, I was introducing him to a bunch of our partners, and the partner asks him, saying, "Are you also a workaholic like Ram?" And this guy goes, "Oh yeah, I can drink too." I'm like, dude, he asked you if you're a workaholic, not an alcoholic, dude.
Well, you touched on earlier Flexport. You are ex-Flexport. It is hard not to talk about digital freight forwarding without Flexport being brought into the conversation. I remember when you were at Flexport, when we first connected, when you were at there, not a lot of people knew about Flexport. But in the course, I think just in the last 2 years now, it's pretty much been on the tons of every person in and out of the industry. What are some of the elements that made Flexport a household name?
Let me start with, obviously, the credit goes to Ryan himself. I mean, Ryan's a dear brother. I have a lot of respect for him. I've known him. I mean, frankly, he gave me my identity here in the Bay Area to be who I am today. Flexport's also an investor in Silq. So I have nothing but respect for them overall in general. And it could also, people could perceive it to be biased. But overall, credit goes to Ryan in a lot of different ways. I mean, he was able to articulate the purpose of digital freight forwarding or the purpose of Flexport in ways that, frankly, people before him could not do. And I have to give credit where credit's due. The idea of having a map as a dashboard and having planes move on it, ships move on it, was not something that we came up with sitting in a dark room. We went to customers' locations and we did see an atlas on the wall, and we did see that they liked to see where the containers were, and there was a sticky note that moved every time the container departed. This happened, and I saw it physically, right? And he was able to take that and bring that to life. So you got to give credit where credit's due, and I think that was a big part. I should say it started with Ryan being able to kind of go against the grain, challenge the naysayers, regardless of what their opinions were, or regardless of where anybody stands on their faith in Flexport. I got to give credit where credit's due. But as far as where Flexport is right now, or the last 2 years, I should say I'm a little removed from the situation, from the reality, because I'm on my own right now building my company. I do have a decent bit of friends still there, and in general, I'm a huge fan. I subscribe to the news, and they're pushing the boundaries further now. They used to be port to port, port to door. That's what we're used to saying in freight forwarding world, and then now there's a new term called port to porch. Or factory floor to customer doors, right? They're pushing the boundaries. It's not very common. There were probably a few players who could do that: DHL, FedEx, UPS. Everybody else was limited to, hey, we could get to your DC. The whole idea of Flexport was to always be the guy, be the service provider for the little guy, right? Be there for the guy who's trying to start his business and operate at the same scale as Walmart does or Target does. And if you're not, I mean, today the reality is you have to work with a forwarder, likely in China, likely in India, likely in the US. And then you have to work with a customs broker, you have to work with a warehouse, a trucking company, a fulfillment provider, all of these people to get your cargo from port to porch. They're trying to disrupt that. And I think that frankly, that the idea has some credibility, and I feel like they're going somewhere with it. It remains to be seen. Obviously, they've taken on a lot of acquisitions, and not a lot of, they've taken on some big acquisitions. They've also made some big moves. They're trying to get into trucking now. I mean, frankly, this is a lot to cover, and I feel like they also have a great leadership team in place right now. Dave Clark is I don't think he needs no introduction. The man built Amazon. I think he knows what he's doing. So I'm a fan. I'm gonna look at and watch on how they go about building this company. I'm still a shareholder, so 100 billion or bust. That's it. As simple as that.
Well, your skin's in the game.
That's right. I have no reason to believe it's not going to happen. All right, I have to be. And if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm in Silicon Valley, I'm an eternal optimist. It's going to be all fine. We're all going to be okay.
Right. So with Flexport sort of branching out its verticals, reaching every direction and so forth, would I be incorrect by saying they're essentially trying to be another Amazon?
So
with the Shopify connection and so forth?
Yeah. So there is that parallel. I've drawn the parallel 1,000 times in my head, right? Obviously, with Amazon, I think Amazon started out as a shop front, a storefront where you could sell your product. And then Amazon slowly and materially got back and back and back and said, hey, I can fulfill your product. Then I can move your product. And I can give you all this advice. I can finance your product. All that stuff, they went backwards. Flexport, though, does not have the benefit of being the front end because they're not selling the product to them. There is that handicap. But with the Shopify kind of stake in it right now, I can't tell where that would go. But yeah, in some ways, there is that kind of parallel universe that they're creating for the Shopify customer. Now, the question is whether every Shopify customer is dead set against also being an Amazon seller. Are they only a Shopify seller? That remains to be seen. I've kind of heard mixed things about from customers in general. There is a significant amount of volume you get out of Amazon. There is a discount that you pay. Whereas with Shopify, you get to build a brand, you get to do all this fun stuff. But there is a heavy price you pay to do that. It's not cheap. It doesn't come cheap. There's a lot of marketing involved. So that is, it's almost. I'm probably going to take a lot of heat for this, but there is this Apple Android war, so to speak, of saying, hey, do you want to go Amazon, Shopify? And by being associated with Shopify, Flexport is part of that package. Whether do you want to go sell on Amazon and let them deal with it, or do you want to go with Shopify and let Flexport and everybody else deal with it? It's almost starting to seem a little bit like that Apple versus Android situation. With Apple being Amazon and Android being, or Google being, Shopify, Flexport is how I'd say it, open source is closed. I can't tell where the future is, but it's a good thing. Overall for the industry, this is a good thing. This is, during tough times, vertical integration is a thing, and that's happening right now in front of our eyes, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Any company doing anything that brings attention to our industry, allows people to be discussing what this industry is, it can only be a good thing, right? Absolutely. If you're talked about, you won't be forgotten about, right?
Absolutely.
If you're not talked about, no one knows you, and you're an industry about to die. So there's been a lot of naysayers, intelligent people who are against the digital freight forwarding, against Flexport, that I read all the time. A lot of these folks are very intelligent folks. They're well researched. They got their data right, and they make a logical argument. But let's be real now. In the real world, it isn't all about logic. If it's anything we've learned in the last few years, it's about narratives. It's about what is hot, what gets people's attention. Even creating content, for example, right? So the world has gone away from logic long time ago. So for us, the biggest issue with our industry has always been the lack of understanding by the young folks of what we do. And as a result, nobody wants to join this industry. And if no young talent wants to join it, we don't bring fresh blood into it. And if we don't bring fresh blood into it, all you're going to get left is old guys like you and I keep on fighting a good fight, but there is not much, energy. So
you have no idea. I was interviewing a sales candidate a couple of weeks ago. He's from the industry. He's worked in legacy forwarding and digital forwarding, and he literally did not take the job at the end of it. It was a compelling offer. We gave him everything he wanted. I loved him. The team loved him, and he basically said, listen, I like everything, but I thought about it. I spent about 7 years in forwarding. Freight forwarding sales is not logical. I give everything the customer wants, and the customer still doesn't want to buy from me. And the reason is that, just there's no logical answer. Just like I like the guy who plays golf with me, and that can't be a logical answer. I made all this pitch, so you're preaching to the choir. You're 100% spot on.
So I know we can talk about this for a long time, Ram, and I know I'm going to come visit US in June, so hopefully we can catch up.
We'll do a live show. How about that?
Yeah, you know what? I will be so high for that, and we might as well bring some of your folks on, do a panel like Q&A. Why not? So again, I really appreciate your time. I know it's coming late now over at how do you call your area? The Bay Area?
The Bay Area.
I got to start using these cool slangs there.
Sun Valley, Bay Area. You got to pay the California taxes, though, to be able to say that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ram. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. It's always interesting talking to you, and you're super easy to listen to. And I'm sure our audience will very much appreciate this particular episode.
Thank you. The pleasure is always mine. I really appreciate doing this, and appreciate you having me on the show.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Well, Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Think Global Logistics.